M1X MacBook Pro 14-inch and 16-inch display resolutions revealed by Apple. I'm iCave Dave and I simplify Apple so that everything just works for you, and revealed in the code of the 7th beta of macOS Monterey, there are 2 new Retina resolutions, and they don't match with any Macs that have ever existed. Okay, I'm making this very dramatic, but you know, we've been waiting a really long time for these, so I'm allowed to get excited, okay? Also, I did try to predict these resolutions about a week or so ago when asked by one of the iCave peeps, so was I right? No, not even close. The 2 new resolutions are 3024 by 1964 and a whopping 3456 by 2234, which are expected to go into the 14 and 16-inch displays, giving us around a 257 pixel per inch pixel density. The current 13-inch and 16-inch MacBook Pro models have 2560 by 1600 and 3072 by 1920 displays for comparison, and of course, as well as the bump in pixel count, we're expecting that Apple will also be upgrading these 2 mini LED display panels like the 12.9-inch iPad Pro 2. And if it's equivalent feature-wise, that would mean 1000 nits of full-screen brightness, 1600 nits of peak brightness, true tone, a 1,000,000:1 contrast ratio, a P3 color gamut, and the one thing that we're less sure about is 120Hz, potentially ProMotion displays. It's just come to the iPhone 13 Pro models, and the biggest issue that stopped it from being in the iPhone 12 Pro models last year was simply finding a supplier that could actually make enough panels to the same level of quality. Supply quantity is a much smaller issue when you're talking about MacBook Pros rather than iPhones, though it does seem as though these panels were still the biggest challenge in production, pushing these back from June to October, and if the higher refresh rate was what caused some of these issues, it could well be a feature that they push back to the next generation. To be clear, there's been very little talk of 120Hz on these, but it also seems like the kind of thing that Apple would want to put in if they've already been able to put it in on their iPads. Especially now they are looking after the whole production, start to finish. We know that the chips are capable. So that's the display, and we might as well run through the rest of what we're expecting for anyone that's not been paying attention so far. Renders are from the very talented Apple Tomorrow, and these new MacBook Pros are expected to be coming with more I/O returning, so expect the HDMI port to return, SD card reader, and the triumphant return of MagSafe charging, alongside Thunderbolt USB-C ports, which will make connectivity much easier than the last generation, where all the ports were just in that Thunderbolt USB-C format. There's also a pretty good possibility that the MagSafe connector, just like the iMac M1 Power Brick, might well feature an Ethernet port, allowing faster and more reliable networking when you're at your desk. In terms of the design, we're expecting flatter surfaces all the way around, and although the current models might seem pretty flat, they actually have smooth curves to the top and bottom. So think more like the iPhone 12, 13 design style, or the iPad Pro, that kind of flat, like really flat. This will make the edges look potentially thicker, especially on the laptop's lids, but that also allows a little bit more space for the mini LED displays, which based on the iPad Pro 12.9-inch, does need a little bit of extra space inside, but that extra depth would also give a little bit more room for things like a better FaceTime camera, because depth for the lenses and the sensors is a really big deal when it comes to image quality in cameras, and very thin enclosures in the past have left very little room to work with. Of course, in the past, a lot less of us were also working remotely, so expect 1080p FaceTime cameras, probably with bigger sensors too, and Apple's image signal processing to make every photon that hits that sensor look as good as it possibly can. And of course, the M1X system on a chip, which is probably the most important part of this product, and it's probably going to be absolutely mind-blowing in practice. I'm expecting it to be based on the same Firestorm performance cores and Ice Storm efficiency cores as the A14, not the A15's Avalanche and Blizzard cores, as just as we mentioned earlier, it seems that the reason we didn't get these earlier this year was because of limitations of mini LED production, not chip shortages. The M1X SoCs have been sitting on the shelf for quite some time. I believe it was around about April that their production was being reported. That said, these will be getting 8 performance cores and 2 efficiency cores, along with a 16 or 32 core GPU, and almost certainly beefier neural engines too, which would be very helpful if Apple decided to implement something like DLSS, allowing the GPUs to run games at 720 or 1080p, and then letting the neural engine dynamically upscale the graphics. This could, if we do get that sweet ProMotion display, allow full resolution gaming at those high frame rates. Now all we need to do is get the developers to actually give us some games to play. But As I mentioned yesterday, Steam has just added native Apple Silicon support for the Steamworks API and support for universal binaries working properly in its store, as well as EVE Online adding support at least on their test server, so things are looking up for games. It really wouldn't surprise me as well if someone from Valve and Steam appeared on the next Apple event to talk about this support for Apple Silicon gaming, if nothing else because it would really annoy Tim Sweeney, the whiny baby in charge of Epic Games. And if you got this far in the video, let's be honest, you probably think I'm okay unless you're Tim Sweeney, so you might as well subscribe and ring my bell. Ring my bell. I promise I'll never do that again, but only if you ring the bell. Beyond M1X MacBook Pros, we could also be getting the Mac Mini with M1X at the event too, which would be a nice little win for people like me who are more comfortable at their own desk instead of at a coffee shop, because those coffee shops rarely use mugs from the iCave collection at icavedave.com/merch. Delicious. And then there's M2, Apple's next generation efficiency chip. Most likely 8 cores like the M1 with a balance of power and efficiency cores, but using the next generation Avalanche and Blizzard cores from the A15. This will most likely arrive too in the next generation of MacBook Air. Mini LED display equipped, white bezels, white keyboard, fun colours. If I'm going to grab a new laptop, that is probably the way I will go. Enough horsepower for me to edit on the go, but also light enough for me to throw in the bag. And importantly, not as expensive as M1X. Anyway, let me know what you're planning to pick up in the comments, and let's answer some of your questions from exactly the same place. Paul F asks, iCave Answers. Hi Dave, loving the show as always. I've been waiting for a new Mac Pro or even larger iMac as I don't require PCIe expansion these days, but I don't think I can wait until next year. I'm thinking of picking up an M1X Mac Mini if such a device is released this year. My question is, I'm running a 2012 12-core Mac Pro with 64GB of RAM. I know I'm getting significantly slowed down through memory swaps since this SSD only runs at approximately 250 megabits read-write. I find that the main issue is Safari or Chrome. It simply won't load up images. Pages can take minutes to load, and a single Safari tab can use in excess of 16GB of RAM. I wonder if this could be metal related, as my machine does not support metal. If this is the case, I will have to get an M1X to tide me over. Any advice would be much appreciated. Okay, so I'm not sure if it is a metal support issue or if it's something completely different, but you are running something from 2012, so it is going to be a little bit long in the tooth, regardless of whether it is a Mac Pro or not. A 2012 model is going to be slow on the newer technologies. I'd be interested to know what operating system you're running, if you've been using like DOS dudes, patches and stuff, because I guess if you're running something that doesn't support metal, you've probably needed to do that. I'm not 100% sure, but I would guess that's probably where the issues are. It's generally, if you go for the unsupported stuff by metal, you tend to have more issues with graphics rendering. With 64 gigs of RAM, you shouldn't really be bumping up against that RAM limit and having to use too much swap, I wouldn't have thought. But yeah, I mean, if you grabbed an M1 Mac Mini right now, which you can probably get for like $5.99 on Amazon, or you know, $6.99 new, $5.99 on Amazon, about the same through a refurb program, you're not going to have any problems with that. It's going to be an absolute dream for you running that compared to a 2012 Mac Pro even. Josh asks, iCave Answers, what is your favourite movie? Okay, this is not super relevant to the channel, but still, let's go for it. I don't really have like a favourite movie that I would just put on all the time. My son loves the new Trolls movie. We've got a lot of value out of buying that from Amazon. But I'm going to say the original, the first Iron Man movie, because I think it was just so well kind of grounded in technology. Also, Tony Stark in that movie using a lot of 30-inch Apple cinema displays, so there's bonus points for it just there. But yeah, I really like that movie. I think it was just so much more kind of grounded than a lot of the stuff that's come since. And I'm not saying that I need all of my superhero movies to be like super grounded, but I just feel like it fit into the real world really nicely, especially with like Elon Musk turning up and stuff in it too. So that's probably going to be my favourite. Let me know your favourite movies down in the comments section, and if you've got a question for me, #iCaveAnswers. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.